When it came to growing up as an INTJ, I always felt like I was out of place and didn't fit in. Now, I'm not talking about teenage angst or going through puberty. I'm talking about as far back as I can remember as a little kid. Perhaps you've heard an INTJ half-jokingly say that they're not human. Well, the truth of the matter is, we're not. Or at least we don't feel like it. Now, yes, I just said the really bad word feel, but for the purpose of today's video, that's what we're going with as I try to bridge the gap between INTJs and actual humans. Let's get started. So why is it so hard for INTJs to relate to the rest of the human race? Well, this starts with a really simple top layer answer that gets complicated very quickly. But the answer is this: we don't speak the same language. Now, no, I'm not talking about languages such as English, Spanish, or German. I am talking about the cognitive functions. Okay, follow me here as I want you to start thinking about the cognitive functions as if they were languages, as if it was German or English or Japanese or Chinese or French or whatever language you speak. Now, for those of you that don't know what the cognitive functions are, a real quick refresher: there are 8 cognitive functions in total, and each personality type is assigned 4 based on their own personal preferences. We caught up so far? Okay, let's keep going. I want you to think about what your personality type is and what your cognitive functions stack looks like. That cognitive function that is in the very top slot, we are going to consider your primary language. Just like I am speaking to you in my primary language of English, literally, this is going to be your primary cognitive function languages for this video. For example, me being an INTJ, my primary cognitive function language would be introverted intuition. With that in mind, there's only one other type that has introverted intuition as its primary cognitive function language, which is INFJs. Simple so far, right? Well, now it's time to get a lot more complicated. Perhaps some of you have seen this chart online that breaks down the personality types based on how often they occur in the human population. Now, yes, this chart does add up to 100%, I did check, and we're going to be referring to it a lot in this video. According to this chart, 2.1% of the population are INTJs, and 1.5% are INFJs. Now we add these two numbers together and we get the pathetically low number of 3.6% of the population. Now, when you talk about this in terms of the cognitive functions as languages, that means introverted intuition primary language is spoken by only 3.6% of the entire human race. In comparison, let's calculate the next lowest number, which is for extroverted thinking, which is employed by ENTJs and ESTJs. Those two add up to a whopping 10.5% of the population. That is almost a 7% gap. Almost 3 times as many people have extroverted thinking as their primary language over those that have introverted intuition. I can hear the commenters now saying, "You forgot, there are 4 cognitive function slots for each personality type. What about those that have NI in the second slot?" To that which I respond, "Do you think I'm that dumb that I wouldn't think to cover that? Come on." So let's look at that second slot of the personality types and see which types have introverted intuition as their second cognitive function. Yes, it's ENTJs and ENFJs, which have a combined population total of 4.3%. 4.3 freaking percent. you can add that number to the 3.6% that we had earlier and still be 2.6% off from our 10.5% that have TE as their primary language. For fun, let's add the percentage of the population that has TE as their secondary cognitive function. It's 13.7%. 24.2% of the freaking population of the entire world communicates in some form of extroverted thinking. That's almost 1/4 of the entire population of the world versus the less than 8% of the population of the human race that has NI as a second or primary function. Now, I will admit that the number becomes a little more optimistic when we move down to the third slot of the cognitive function stack. That means that we have to include ISTPs and ISFPs, and those two's population percentage combined gives us an additional 14.2%. But then you have to do the same thing for TE, which means you're adding ENFPs and ESFPs, which gives you a total of 16.6% of the population, which is still a bigger number. At this point, I want to backtrack, as INTJs share extroverted thinking with ISTJs in that second slot. So let's take a look at INFJs, extroverted feeling, and see what those numbers are. Extroverted feeling is shared by INFJs with ISFJs in the second slot. And would you look at the percentage of the population that's ISFJ? 13.8%. If you add INFJ's population percentage to that number, you get 15.3% of the entire world's population has FE as their second function. If we then add those personality types that have FE as their primary cognitive function, which is ESFJs and ENFJs, we get a grand total of 30.1% of the population of the world that communicates in some form of extroverted feeling. Gee, no wonder INFJs don't feel so lonely. At this point, let's briefly recap. For just the primary functions, that is the cognitive function that is in the very top slot of the cognitive function stack, you have 3.6% of the population that have introverted intuition as their primary language. 10.5% have extroverted thinking, and 14.8% have extroverted feeling. In the second slot, NI has 4.3, TE has 13.7, and FE has 15.3. I realize that these numbers could fluctuate slightly, but even given that, you still have the fact that the smallest population percentage of the entire world has introverted intuition as its primary cognitive function. One could argue that NI, being an introverted function, that is one that's not readily displayed outward to the world, could be ignored in favor of the INTJ's secondary function, which is extroverted thinking. If you were to do this, then yes, you could argue the fact that 24% of the world's population can effectively communicate with INTJs. But then I have a question for you. How do you explain ENFPs? Ultimately, my theory is strictly the numbers, and open to a little bit of interpretation. But, and I have to stress this, less than 4% of the world's population is supposed to have introverted intuition as their primary cognitive function. Doesn't this fact alone speak volumes as to why INTJs don't think of themselves as human? This video took a really interesting turn as I dove into the math instead of my own personal reasons. But I have to say this, when I got going on the math, I had a lot of fun, which I hope shows in this video. But that also means that I didn't cover my own personal reasons why I don't always feel like a human. So for that, it means that there's going to be a part 2. And if you don't want to miss that, make sure that you hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, and ring that notification bell so you're notified when that video drops. Also, please don't forget to give this video a like to help me to grow this channel. And while you're here, if you enjoyed listening to me, check out one of my other videos. Thank you though so much for watching. As always, don't forget to be cool and have fun.